Hello and welcome to the first episode of Climate Matters. My name is Lyn Schad and I am a member of your Falmouth Climate Action Network. Today's episode is going to be about connecting the dots of climate change and regenerative agriculture. And I am here today with Ellie Costa and Jeny from Farming Falmouth to talk about this. You may ask why climate change and farming. This past year, Falmouth has held two movie events, Kiss the Ground and Common Ground, that deal with the subject of regenerative agriculture. And in this time of finding solutions to climate change, I found it very refreshing and inspiring to learn that it doesn't always have to be high-tech answers, big price tag answers, and high cost of daily operation to address the issues and the matters of climate change. No one solution is going to fix the problem, but regenerative agriculture can reduce the impact of industrial agriculture, which contributes a whopping 14% to our global greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm here today with Ellie and Jeny to talk about this and to help us put the pieces together between climate change and regenerative agriculture. And don't worry, you don't have to be a farmer to benefit from what we're about to tell you today. So, Jeny and Ellie, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us here. We're actually delighted to be able to talk about regenerative ag with you.
And we're here on an absolutely glorious day. Today is October 22nd. And we're actually probably experiencing a little bit about what climate change is doing for us, right?
Yeah. This would be the good side.
This would be the good side. Yeah, right. So let me ask you, can you explain to us about the natural process of photosynthesis, which actually helps to draw carbon dioxide out of the air? And that's what we want to do. So how well is it working, and in some cases, why is it not working so well? Because if our natural processes can do this, why do we have the problem that we have?
You want to start?
Yeah. It's a good one to explain simply because it can get really chemical, right? So our friend Molly Bang and Penny Chisholm wrote this amazing book called Living Sunshine, which helps even kids understand this very complex chemical conversion of sunlight into living energy. So the conversion of that sunlight is turning it into the sugars of the plant. And so that CO2 is being drawn down into the plant cells and being put into the soil, into carbon through many different processes.
Yeah. So there's a conversion of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to the carbon compounds that the plant then secretes, really, through the root system. Some of it is used by the plant, but some of it is secreted, which supports the microbial life in the soil. So it's doing a lot for life on all levels. But right now, the modern world is creating far too much carbon dioxide for the plants to be able to manage it all. And not only that, how much farmland are we losing every day?
2,000 acres.
Yeah.
2,000 acres?
In America, we're losing 2,000 acres of land every day.
Farmland specifically. I mean,
Yeah.
those numbers are specific to farmland, and I can't imagine it's much higher.
Do we, just out of curiosity, do we know how much carbon dioxide an acre of land can draw down?
There's math on it, and it changes depending on the crop, depending on the species of forest, the type of forest, the soils. It's mathy.
It's mathy.
yeah. And I mean,
Do you know all this math? Do you know how to do this math?
Mm-mm.
You do, though.
I'm going to admit I don't.
I have done some of this math briefly, and it's complicated. I mean, I have a renewable energy degree, so it's like there's certain things that convert just because we talk about energy, and I like to think about energy in the terms of calories a lot of the times, because in my mind, like a calorie is very human-centered, right?
Yes,
So you
yeah.
can think about things a little
You
bit.
think about them a lot,
You know,
don't we?
we need how many calories a day, and 1 gallon of gasoline is 700 hours of a human working.
Oh, wow.
Something like that. Like
Seven-
you know, so you think about how much food energy we had to put into our bodies to produce the amount of energy in one. You know, so just thinking about the energy put into making those calories. There's a lot of ways to think about energy, and food is very much one of them.
I'm thinking of another way to think about CO2 also in the atmosphere. We've already said there's more CO2 than the plants could manage. Not only that, we're chopping out 2,000 acres a day of potential for plants, but industrial agriculture, the practices of industrial agriculture have degraded many of the soils that are left so that those soils aren't the carbon sinks that they could be if the soil were healthy. And soil is the best carbon sink of all.
Yeah. I mean, and thermally, we have a lot of bare ground in this world that we did not have. And if we left
When
it
you say
alone-
bare ground, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean deforestation, I mean overgrazed rangeland, I mean the Dust Bowl, I mean the way we agriculture in this country and other industrialized places, we don't keep the ground covered as much as humanly possible, which is like what naturally happens when humans step away, right? Weeds show up, the ground gets covered automatically, and that's plants coming in to do the work, do the repair of that exposed soil. It's like it's helping. Weeds are supposed to be doing their job.
So, for example, in a society that has embraced monocultures, so one huge crop
Type of
of
crop.
commodity crop like soybean or corn, when that crop is growing, okay, the soil is in use and covered, but it's when the crop is done, then the soil is often left bare. So there are huge tracts of land that are bare half the year, more than half the year. So the wind comes in, erosion happens, the topsoils, we're actually losing topsoil in this country through these practices.
Is topsoil the most nutrient dense of the different layers of, because there's different layers of earth, of the earth, right? Is
We know-
that,
Check me on this. I mean, it's my understanding that the topsoil is the richest, it has the most organic matter.
Yeah, there's many layers to soil, especially.
Yeah.
so
depending
when
on
we
your
when we
geography.
take the
Yeah.
crops away, when the farmer takes the crops away, if they don't cover it with another crop or something,
Right.
then it's essentially it's exposed to the elements.
It's exposed to the elements.
And it can't retain that
Right.
that nutrient or the, what is it, like it called a microbiome or something like that?
Well, there are lots of things that
Yeah.
contribute to the
Part-
degradation of the microbiome.
I'm using words now.
True.
Hoping
Right, so-
correctly.
So that's the biological life in the soil, right? The microbiome and the fungal life in the soil, all the living life in the soil that's different from organic matter. And when you cover the soil, you allow that to grow. When you leave the roots in that are still exuding, sugars, carbon compounds, then you're nurturing that biome, that biological life in the soil. So another product or another practice of industrial agriculture is to plow deeply, to turn the soil over. So every time that happens, carbon is being re-released into the air, and the colonies of bacteria and fungal life that could create healthy soil are interrupted. They're exposed to the light. They can't survive.
The heat, they get baked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the things you can do to encourage photosynthesis gets harder and harder as you use up soils. So a lot of the luck we've had in this country was because we had these great open plains, like the breadbasket that we had is degraded now to the point where it's not 70% less nutrients in the same tomato grown in the same field.
Wow.
So every time you take a piece of corn, a tomato out of a field, you're taking some of that soil nutrients with it. Right? That's how we get our body's nutrients, is what we put in. And that means we're taking it from somewhere. And so that biological process happened in the field, it got shipped to us, we ate it, we did another thing, we
Right.
turned it into our energy.
Right.
And it's, that soil connection can't be understated because of that complex ability to sink carbon into it. And a lot of those movies really focused on animal agriculture, which is great. It's a great place for us to start thinking about this because those industries are also big emitters. So cows, mob grazing of cows is much different than CAFOs of cows.
What is
And
CAFOs?
so a confined feed lot operation, CAFO. So when you think of those horrible PETA pictures of a pig or a chicken or a cow, like crammed together, knee high in their own poop, that is a CAFO. That is nothing nature ever intended.
Doesn't sound like a good
Yeah.
word.
No.
Nor a good
yeah,
practice.
Yeah, and people are shocked when they find out that like 80% of our meat industry is that. And that local meat
Really, 80% of our meat industry?
I want to say more, actually.
I bet
I
it's-
was being really conservative with 80. Like,
Yeah.
Could be closer to 90.
Yeah.
And that's a huge lobbying arm of, our consumer world. And so it's a big industry, but it's a big industry that if it actually transitioned to regenerative agriculture mindset, then it could have the ability to actually sink a lot of carbon, kind of the way the bison did that built up that breadbasket soil.
Right.
That's right.
And that really is like free-ranging animals being pushed around by predators. It's like that's what built it, and they didn't stay in one place at once.
Yeah.
And that's where we're getting like super toxic water estuaries because of runoff from these operations that just
Unhealthy.
put all of the feces of these animals into like ponds. And then spray them like kind of close to people's houses and like there's like whole documentaries on these, and I hope everybody digs in and learns more about the meat industry. But the bright side is that regenerative agriculture piece.
But
where
there is a
yeah,
positive way of having meat.
absolutely.
Because, we all enjoy, well, maybe not all of us, some of us are vegetarians, and I did enjoy eating meat at one time, and I appreciate other people who eat meat. But there is a more humane and a more productive way in terms of sustainability way of raising beef or chickens or pigs or whatever, right?
I think like so many aspects of regenerative ag, which is really a collection of sustainable practices, is that they mimic nature, right? So Jeny is talking about the buffalo and the plains. Herds come together as a mob. They call it mob grazing now. The people who are now adopting these practices that mimic nature. So the animals move over here and they eat for a while and they fertilize the soil and then
Right.
they churn it up a little bit with their hooves and then they move over here and they do the same thing and they're constantly moving around.
But in the meantime, they don't stay on that plot that they ate
No,
down.
no.
So that plot has an opportunity to grow back.
Exactly,
It's
so you can
They're not going to
continue-
go back there if there's nothing to eat.
And that land continues to draw down
Draw down
carbon,
the carbon,
because
right.
it's keeping because the plants are living. They're not
Yeah.
destroyed by the agricultural activity.
Yeah, I have to I'm finding myself thinking, this concept of more sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture, like it's definitely a natural concept, but it's such a good concept. There's so many positives about it. It draws down more CO2. It has a place for the CO2 to be sequestered. You have more nutrient-dense food. You have more humane conditions for animals. Like, there's all these plus factors. Why did we move away from this? I
think that,
Follow the money.
I think follow
But
the
it
money.
just seems like the money would be there.
But there were technological discoveries in the early 20th century, just being able to create nitrogen fertilizers synthetically was an early
Yeah.
20th century discovery.
And I guess even the invention of the equipment, the farming equipment, that made it possible
Right, well, you've
to-
got World War II and our industrial
Right.
capacity to make huge machines.
Right.
So I think all that caught the imagination of society. Oh, this is modern, this is better. And the notion that the population is growing and we've got to figure out how to feed them. I think that the culture just moved toward industrial answers to the problems of the day, not realizing what the effects of those industrial solutions would be, those big ag solutions. And now we're seeing the effects. Now we're realizing.
Yeah, do you see, though, a way of, and this may sound a little contradictory, of industrializing regenerative agriculture? Because we do have, I mean, the population continues to grow, right? We have, what, 7 billion people on this planet now? And many of those people don't have a way of having meaningful ways of producing food for themselves. The climate and the changes in the climate are only going to exacerbate that for many of those regions of the world. So there's maybe an opportunity for us to be able to offer better food for these people, but it clearly has to be done on scale.
Well, it's interesting. I've got two thoughts on this running right alongside each other. One of our board members, Patricia, often reminds us that most of the world's food is grown on small farms. So I don't know if we have to industrialize in the sense that it has to be a big farm.
Yeah, and you know what? I didn't actually mean that it had to be a big farm.
Right.
It was more in terms of meeting the capacity or the numbers that are out there.
Right.
So whether it's more small farms, and is there a way of maybe achieving that, more small farms instead of the big farm, you know?
To finish the parallel thought, in the movie Food Inc., we saw some great examples of large-scale farms, and Gabe Brown in North Dakota, right, is another example of a large farm.
Is that the farmer that was in the movie Common Ground?
Common Ground,
Okay,
yeah. So these are two people who realize, and they're not the only ones, but there's some, maybe they have the highest profile at this moment, but they have realized that you can actually use these practices on their farms, on these large farms. So this idea of keeping the ground covered, instead of tilling, they've got a machine that just crimps, knocks the cover crop down. So that creates a cover. They've got a different machine for planting into that kind of a surface. So industrial solutions can help a large farm become regenerative now. It's absolutely in our grasp.
Yeah.
It's about changing the mindset of the farmers who probably grew up raising food a certain way, and that's how their daddy did it, and that's how they were rewarded by government, by grants, by whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's within our grasp to do it on a large and a small scale. As far as being able to feed the world's population, what do you think about this?
We sure throw a lot away. So
we throw.
We grow plenty of food. I mean, one of those movies and the guest that we had,
Right.
Mary Nessa was saying, like, we grow enough calories in this country for everybody, man, woman, and child, to have 4,000 calories.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
where is that other 2,000 that we need going? And most of us live a lifestyle that we don't actually need 2,000 calories, right?
Right.
That's based on a very active lifestyle.
Yeah.
And we are not there all
Right.
all of us all the time.
Right.
And so, right,
I'm sure you folks are probably.
So where do those calories end up?
Yeah.
A lot of them in the landfill, because there's not like nationwide composting. There's not even statewide composting.
Right.
There's like initiatives beginning, but there's a huge additive to CO2 as well.
So another aspect we haven't even discussed about regenerative systems is this idea of taking the food that maybe is going to be thrown away and not putting it in the landfill, turning it into compost.
Right.
So cover crops is one of the tenets. No-chill is one of the tenets. But composting and using local material to nurture the soil rather than purchasing fertilizers that are chemical and have been produced far away and often release more, nitrous oxide into the air. So regenerative ag can address food waste as well and turn that food into healthy crops. So it's a closed loop kind of a system.
That's the idea, because that's how nature does it, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
like there is no waste in a natural system. And when you have a small localized agriculture system, everybody clicks in if it's healthy, right? If you have cows and you have too much nitrogen because you have a lot of fertilizer that you can now sell as compost to your local vegetable farmer. And if you have waste whey because you are making cheese, you have a pig farmer that can absolutely feed that to their pigs, right? There is like a rotating amount of resources
Yeah.
for producers if it is a strong food system. And so it's building that back up again when it gets lost that's hard, and that's kind of what Falmouth is in that predicament of, is that our food system was this amazing strawberry capital of the world. I mean, of New England, that would be cool. Maybe. But we're losing
We had the
farms.
whaling industry. So
Yeah, I mean, the
we had strawberry
industries shift, right, as things change
Mm-hmm.
and as soils get depleted. Like, if you're not pulling the same yield, inflation happens, whatever reasoning, farming becomes non-economical or not desirable in a community, and they start to disappear the way they are here, it gets really hard to rebuild it, because those big plots of land that, say, would hold a dairy
Yeah.
don't
Y-
exist.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other thing is too, is that we now have this global accessibility. So, for different regions of, let's just talk about the United States, we can't grow everything in every part of the United States, right? Up here in New England, we have a different growing season than we have in California, right? But because we have this accessibility to either, grab food from California or Peru or whatever, then the need to have farms more locally kind of goes away, because now people can have their choice of whatever they want, whenever they want it, any time of year.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it is a real shift in mindset, because the consequences of that availability are invisible when you go to the grocery store. You don't really understand how much
Right.
transportation was involved or what the growing practices are in
Yeah.
that place that's so far away. So we've totally lost the connection to
Right.
where and how our food is grown.
Right. And that's that's the other component of how does farming connect with climate change, is as we pull more and more food from non-local areas, we're relying upon these systems that use fossil fuels and emit more carbon dioxide.
It's kind of, I find it shocking when I read something like, Oregon is, I believe, the filbert capital of maybe the world. Anyhow, they grow an enormous.
Which capital?
Oregon.
No,
It's the-
Oregon, but
the-
it's the capital of what?
Filberts. They grow
Filberts,
filberts.
okay.
Hazelnuts.
Hazelnuts,
Hazelnuts,
mhm.
right. So, but when you, they actually export most of them. So all of that goodness is grown right there, and it's not for the people living around where it's grown. I mean, I think this goes back to, this global,
Yeah.
Australian beef being sold here, and we're selling some to them, this whole sort of global trade thing that has
Right.
happened.
Right.
So,
But maybe they do meet the need for filberts in the Oregon area, but they grow so much more that now there's an economy to, like you said, export them to a place that doesn't have them in exchange for something that they have. Yeah. That's a hard nut to crack. Sorry.
well done.
Big industries don't always have the need to support the locals, right?
Right.
They can go for the cheapest, and if Oregon hazelnuts are 2 cents over the mark, then they're going with Chinese or whoever grows the next cheapest, and then Oregon's stuck holding a bunch of. So yeah, they're gonna export. It's like the game is interesting, right?
Oh, the
But,
game is about making money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yet I find myself now, that we're talking about how much better it is to have products that are grown regeneratively. They may have a cheaper product, but are they actually going to have a better product? Are they going to have something that is healthier for the body? More nutrient dense means that the body is not necessarily going to
Need as much.
need as much. You're not going to feel hungry right away,
There's some great people doing amazing work on this called the Bionutrient Food Association. And they envision a future where like consumers can like scan the code on the bag of carrots and get a nutrient breakdown.
How
of that
far away
carrot.
is that, do you think, as an actual practice?
I would check their website. It's been in the works for a decade.
And what's the name of that group again?
Bionutrient Food Association. And they have like a handheld like sugar reader, which you can like take into a grocery store and like compare two carrots side by side, you know, by just putting a little juice on a spectrometer thing. And they've like made this chart based off of citizen science data that they've been gathering for years from people sending in their data on like specific types of crops. So carrots is one, spinach is one, and there's tomato. There's a third one on their website where you can like read the nutrient breakdowns. And an organic carrot from California might not be as nutrient dense as like a commercial grown carrot that was picked a week ago in Mass. So to be able to pay for what you're getting is ideally the future, because once consumers have that knowledge and power, then they're going to make those choices for their family. And then farmers are going to have to step up with their soil health practices, or they're not going to be able to keep up with the farmers that have invested in their soils. And that's the thing that I think people are going to adjust to as we realize how important nutrients from our food is to our health. It's like once that clicks, people start just eating differently.
If we do it right with regenerative agriculture and commercial or industrial agriculture contributes 14% of the greenhouse gas emissions, could we conceivably reduce that to zero? Could we conceivably have more of a, even more of a drawdown of CO2 with these practices implemented? I mean, I guess in a way a little fantasizing a little bit, because I realize there's a lot of layers here that one needs to go through. But I'm curious as to what you as farmers would be able to shed some light on that question.
Well, the first thought is that the greenhouse gas emissions include methane, include CO2, and isn't there a nitrous oxide? Anyway, component. So I feel that I'm not a scientist. I'd have to do some research and see what they're saying. But I think if everyone were to turn toward regenerative practices, then we would have healthy soils. We would have the best carbon sink. If farmland conservation can speed up, because we're, even though there's more conserved now than ever, we're still losing it faster than we're conserving it, right? So you've got to conserve the land first. We've got to change the mindset to a regenerative way. And then I would think you could make that significant change, certainly in the CO2. As far as methane gases, I'm curious to see what you think about this. I think there's a decision that has to do with changing our mindsets in terms of how much meat do we need to eat. I have a feeling that will be the biggest, have the biggest impact on methane gases, but I'd have to do some research. I'm not sure.
I mean, that's why cows were under fire, was the methane reduced to create burgers, right? And so some of it has to do with their poop, some of it has to do with the feed that. If you tally it up, right, the CO2, the fossil fuel use to create the corn that they then feed the cow, which they're not supposed to eat anyway,
right.
And they
Why are they not supposed to eat corn?
They never would walk into a cornfield on their own and just like it's not
a natural
they're
food.
Grass eaters,
Yeah.
and as much as like that's a type of grass, it's like anyway, it's not. Their stomachs handle it somehow, but there's a reason they are like full of antibiotics is because they get sick, because not in an environment, and they're enclosed and they're standing in their own, there's lots of reasons.
And isn't there a connection between the corn and the methane gas?
So they produce more methane because they're
Because
fed
they're
a
eating
diet
corn.
that their stomachs
Right.
are not meant to handle. And when they measured that methane, I'm sure they were in like a clear glass room without like natural absorption happening with the soil. Because when a cow belches, it belches straight at the ground, and there's lots of biology down there that actually knows how to deal with that. So it's just funny to talk to people about how they got those numbers on the
Yeah.
belching data. The cow, anyway. So the
So they
cows were under
probably
fire
put the cow into a chamber, a glass chamber.
right, and then multiply that by like
Yeah.
how many, and like got
Interesting.
some numbers, which are probably accurate in a very enclosed space, but in a natural, if you're in a grass field with the wind blowing, with the biology at the level of the cow's mouth is like not just blowing away. There's actual like biology there to do. Anyway,
to deal with it. And that, in some
But-
ways, that brings us around full circle, because we started with the concept of photosynthesis in the sense that with photosynthesis, it expels oxygen into the air. We breathe the oxygen.
Yeah.
We expel the carbon dioxide, and our natural world sequesters that carbon dioxide. In the perfect world, and that's very simplistic. I realize that that's very simplistic. So here we have cows that belch into the ground, and there's a system here that captures it. It's pretty remarkable. It's really, I think so. I think it's pretty remarkable.
natural systems
Are
are
pretty-
cool.
they're pretty
Yeah,
cool.
when you let them
Yeah.
be natural, right? Like it's
Right.
Yeah.
the problems that arise right from these industrial exciting revolutions that we've had in agriculture. It's like there's always an unintended consequence, and it's really hard to go back when you've gotten an entire industry on board. Or I mean, I hope people can like dig into some documentaries about food, because there's some that are really eye-opening about sort of like the farmer's plight in this, because the way some of these companies approach them to say like, hey, you want a contract, I'll build you 3 barns to do my chickens in, and you'll do this many, and they provide you the food, they provide you the loan, they provide you everything, and then if you for some reason can't make those loans, or if you're locked in, like you can't change your farming practices for 25 years till you pay off that tractor or that barn or that equipment that you've been now cornered into signing debt for. And one of the movies I think it was Common Ground, they really talked about the amount of debt. No, it was the other one, Common.
Food Inc. Chew.
Food Inc.
Yeah.
too went into a lot about like the debt of farmers in this country is scary, and they got into debt thinking they could grow more food, and most of them are just
They did touch on, I'm sorry to interrupt, but they did touch on that I kissed the ground with that
it
one
was
farmer.
just a little
had
bit
that.
in both, because you can't not touch on the plight of the farmers who are like the backbone of this country, that are seeing pennies of that dollar, whatever you pay for a
Food
steak,
dollar, yeah.
that farmer that did most of the work is not seeing much of that. $50 steak you just bought, and $2 that might trickle down to the farm or the community that it grew. So it's very much, if everybody decided to localize their shopping purchases as much as they could, like that alone, getting the community and people to realize that they would change the system for the better if they could make more local purchases, just because that local farmer can exist.
You're reminding me, I can't remember where I read this, but it was Gabe Brown talking. Oh, he wrote a book called Dirt to Soil. Great book. But he talked a lot about the economics of farming. So as he transitioned to regenerative practices, his farming got much less expensive. He started
I was just
making
gonna
money.
ask about
He started
that.
making more money. Yeah. So, I mean, it's good for the farmers. It's good for the economy,
Right.
Yeah.
Now we have all these pluses for regenerative agriculture.
I've got another one that I read just before I came here. So there's a flood, and you've got fields with healthy soil. They absorb much of the water.
Oh.
But the field right next door that has poor soil
It's just
doesn't
gonna wash
absorb the
right
water.
off.
It just washes off. So the changes that we're inevitably going to experience in climate, many of those can be mitigated by soils that have been regenerated.
And practices that mimic natural systems.
Exactly.
Like having trees, rows of trees just to slow the wind down or to slow the water down, or systems to manage the water in a way that's not a straight line, that mimics, slow it down.
Right,
Let,
yeah.
Let the
Yeah.
water.
Or have eelgrass, along the shores so that it slows down the energy of the waves, so it doesn't erode the shorelines as much. Yeah.
I mean, more plants, more photosynthesis, right?
Right, more, yeah.
More land
I don't
for
know whether
plants.
this is an answerable question or not, but if you take the state, let's just take Cape Cod, not the state of Massachusetts, but Cape Cod. What would the proportion have to be of open land or the equivalent in farmland to making us carbon neutral? Or
I think you're above our pay grade.
Yeah, that's a lot
I
of
think we
math.
need to, no, I mean, I think we actually have to, I'm sure people are studying this. I wonder if they're studying this at Woodwell.
yeah,
Research
that might
Center.
be the next interview.
I think about how much land do we need to grow enough food so the Massachusetts Farmland Action Plan calls for us to be growing 30% of our food regionally.
Okay.
By
So
2030.
there's some math that was done, yeah.
Right, so some math is done about how much food
And when you say
has to be
us,
grown.
Ellie, are you talking about Cape Cod or Massachusetts?
Massachusetts.
So-
Well,
so-
anywhere you're living, there should be enough land to grow 30% of your food, to have a strong enough food system. There's another number. Is it 60 by 60? I think they have a longer range
Thought it
goal
was
as well,
50
but the
by
first goal is 30% by 30. So those are the terms I'm always thinking about. Okay, how much land would we need, and what is 30% of the food? And in fact, we
what is
have a
30%?
board member right now who's just finishing up a food system assessment that he has done for Falmouth. So we're hoping that we're going to get some direction from that.
Oh.
We're hearing that it's almost done. We're about to read it ourselves.
Yeah. It's a
Is
lot.
that something that will be available as a public session that people
Absolutely.
can participate in or attend?
Absolutely.
Oh, that
And we
sounds
hope to
wonderful.
be able to use it as information and support for our town government. Yeah, we just hope that it's going to have an impact on the planning that we're doing here in Falmouth for our own food system.
It backs it up with the data
Mm-hmm.
of the needs we have here in Falmouth and the state of affairs.
Which was a little digression, sorry.
No, that's okay. No, that's good information to have. So, I had a series of questions here, but I think we actually really covered quite a bit of these questions with your answers. Let's talk about the new generation of farmers, in particular farmers here on Cape Cod. We want to keep this, farming is not, farming happens all over this country, but we're talking about the benefits of keeping it local and doing it more responsibly and sustainably. So what's happening to our local farmers?
I mean, as a young farmer, I don't know how we're supposed to survive here on Cape Cod. So I don't know where they are. I mean, there's a few amazing farms here that hire a few young farmers every year. But there's also farms here in town that have to get J1s because they can't afford to pay a living wage that you could survive on Cape Cod to farm workers, right? And so which is nothing against the visas. It's that's what you have to do as a farmer, and it happens all over this country where we have.
What is a J1?
It's a special visa holder. It's a work visa. So they come to help. Same thing with every apple you've probably ever eaten from Washington. There's just a crew of people that go up to pick these apples, and sometimes it's the same faces every year. They're like families. Sometimes they're not treated very well. But there's, farm workers are imported because it's not a job people want to do. there's definitely been a downward slide of people wanting to do agriculture. And I imagine it's a lot of families pushing their kids away from agriculture, watching, their investments not return, right? Or the land not returning that investment. But my generation of farmers going to school are being taught a lot about soil. Like, the focus right now is soil. Mm-hmm. And so we are coming at farming from such a different place. And a lot of us understand it's about the soil, and if you can put your energy into the soil, your returns are there. But it's like having access to a place where you can build soil is
it's number
struggle.
one. Number one is that young
Land.
farmers need access to land,
Mm-hmm.
and there isn't a lot of land left here.
And I think, the same argument can be made for there's not enough land to build more houses because our population has grown so much as well. So it becomes this kind of vicious cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do we
Competing
take the
cycle.
land that's left? I think I read a number of 14% of Cape Cod is still sort of, will it be developed? Will it be preserved? 14%. So, how do we, what are the compromises we need to make to, and I think there's a mind shift that has to happen. And I think the young farmers coming out of schools are already in this shift, which is, I don't need a big farm. I'm learning how I can grow a lot of food on a small farm. And so we see lots of examples in our region of Roots Farm across the way in Tiverton, Rhode Island. The last time I looked at their numbers, they grew 24,000 pounds of produce on an acre and a half.
Wow.
And employ 7 people. So the methods that young farmers are learning are healthy for the soil and much more efficient, and they're not buying big equipment because they don't need it, because they can do a lot on a little bit of land. And they've learned how to extend the seasons, and they're taking advantage of some technology, as in hoop houses on rails that can move to different places in a field depending on the sunlight requirements, the temperature, what you're growing at a certain time of year. Vertical trellising, where you can have so much more cucumber, tomato, whatever it is you're trying to grow, because you're growing up instead of taking up all the land. And then regenerating that soil with compost that you're not buying from far away. It's coming from the area around you. So all of that is making farming actually economically viable with a smaller bit of land, which is good news.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Very
good news. But I think that communities have to commit to finding the land and making sure young farmers have access to it. We see a role for a nonprofit, Farming Falmouth, to assist with all of this. And maybe it's about buying and preserving land, but maybe it's also about realizing, oh, there's land over there that could be leased. Let's make a deal and let's get a farmer on that land. So there are lots of ways to take advantage of small parcels that are still available. Right here.
Yeah. And we have our own examples here in town where, our service garden project is a quarter of an acre, and our goal is 5,000 pounds off of a quarter of an acre, and we're at 4,300 right now. And so
And how long did it take to get to that volume?
That's
One
our
season.
second. Yeah, well, that's one season.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah,
that's
wonderful.
Yeah, and so that started. We started June.
Started in June, really picked up in July and August.
Yep.
But they're still harvesting a lot of food as of Monday, right? It's going to go all the way through November.
Another 250 pounds this Monday, and
Yeah.
more.
So
plants.
are we experiencing, we all have been appreciating this beautiful weather that we've had throughout September into October. Is this kind of like a bonus period of time that's allowing you to generate more food, or would you be normally?
Cape Cod is a really cool place to grow.
But it's also, though, about the way you're thinking about planting. So Jeny is succession planting. So that row in one season might have grown 3 or 4 different things. So as soon as one is done, a new layer of compost, put in the next either seeds or seedlings, and you're growing the next crop. So, this is a different way of thinking about growing food that these young farmers are coming out of school with. It's exciting.
Yeah. So that's what's happening with our young farmers, is they are adapting to better farming practices, more sustainable farming practices, where we can get healthier foods, more nutrient-dense foods, and using less in terms of fossil fuels.
And small scale and human friendly, so the farmer is able to make a living and survive. So it's
That's-
different than
yeah.
it was. It's different. I mean, there was a trend, right? If you say agriculture was a significant part of the economy here, that changed with certain technology that made strawberries, not as necessary in certain markets. But so people began selling off land, and this economy became oriented to retirement and resorts.
Yeah,
So I think
ironically,
that
though,
happened, but I think now that we have more knowledge about sustainable ways to grow food, I think the trend is going the other way. We feel like we're riding a wave of awareness.
That's really good to hear.
That's exciting. Yeah.
It's nice when people like have heard it or a little bit before, or they're like, oh yeah, that thing I've heard about that.
Yeah, now it's not a foreign concept, it's actually something that people have heard at least a little bit about.
Right.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
hope so, and if not, we hope we can connect with them soon.
right.
Right.
Because I feel like the sooner you start that conversation with people, the sooner they start like just thinking of the little ways they can transition things, right? Because I always like to walk away from something that's like negative, like climate change, right? And like, what can I do? What can I do? This is depressing.
Yeah.
I need some hope. And there's like a lot of hope in food and regenerative agriculture that consumers can do a really easy thing. It's not as hard as buying solar panels.
Yeah.
It's not
yeah.
as expensive as an electric car. And there's benefits too, like, for low-income families to get access to healthy local food. Like, there are programs to support for, making sure everybody has good food. And a lot of young farmers are really community-oriented. Like, it's like in us. It's like something, and I know 4 kids in this town that grew up and graduated from Falmouth or FA, and they went to school for agriculture, and they are not doing it.
Oh, that's disappointing.
And I know people that
I'm sure
would
they're
be farming
disappointed.
in this town, but they couldn't afford the land, and so now they're Farmer of the Year in New Hampshire. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
we're losing really talented farmers as
Yeah.
much as we're losing farmland because the economics. Unless your family owns land that you are able to farm here,
Yeah. Or if your family owns land that's not farmed but has the capability of being farmed, perhaps consider that for a local farmer to lease,
Yeah.
Because, farmland is beautiful, look out over growing crops or even the cover crops, that are just kind of waving in the breeze,
I mean, and I think that, like, I hope to change people's minds about what a farm looks like and where it belongs. Too, I think there's a lot of big open yards and big open town spaces that could be absolutely growing food for the schools, for the service center, for community in general. There's open space that's somebody's being paid to mow it, somebody's being paid to fertilize it, somebody's being paid to treat it, somebody's being paid to prune it, and like, if we're gonna pay people to do all these things, why not pay people to grow food?
Grow food on it,
right? Yeah.
What are we doing?
Right. Yeah.
We're watering it, we're weeding it, we're seeding it, we're doing a lot to land, and that's the biggest crop in this country is grass.
Is it really?
When you think
Wow.
about how much water, how much fertilizer, and how little it actually does for our landscape. Like, it doesn't, unless you have a cow grazing on your lawn, you're not like sequestering carbon with your lawn. So
You're not, right? You're not?
Well, you
Not
must be
very
some.
much.
You must be.
Little bit.
Yeah.
But
Because I think
yeah.
to some degree, people may think that, if they have this nice luscious lawn, that
It's better than there.
it's better than no lawn, right? It's better than no lawn,
Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
I think our love of lawns comes from lots of different places in our culture, and I never would, deny anybody what they have learned to
Right.
love.
right.
No.
But
Yeah.
we do hope to entice people to appreciate the beauty of a pollinator field.
Yes. I think that's
what that
happening more,
offers
like
as well.
we have now No Mow May, at least 1 month out of the season where some people are choosing not to mow their lawns.
I like that.
Yeah, there's a changing
There's a little bit of a
attitude.
change, yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
exciting.
the average person, the local person here, what would you suggest that they do? I mean, you alluded to it a little bit, as far as, if you have, whether you have a really small patch of land on like 1/10 of an acre, or even if you don't have any land, but you have pots that you could put stuff in to grow. Like, there's little ways that people can make a contribution to this effort, and to the more things that we have growing, the more we're going to be able to count. At least it's a very sort of pared down philosophy about it, but the more we have growing, the more we're going to be able to help offset the carbon emissions that we continue to put into the air.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if we don't have space for growing, we can choose to support the people who do.
Right.
In other words, support the farmer, the local food. Yeah.
Support the local farmers, and also the establishment, like farm-to-table restaurants. We don't, and maybe this is not the right understanding, but there's not a lot in this area, because it's sort of like this double-edged sword here. We don't have the farms to produce the farm-to-table. But if we had more farms, we could have more restaurants that did farm-to-table.
Right. Right. So it starts with the land, the farmers.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there are just so many
And
ways.
we have plenty
could
of restaurants.
yeah.
And the
but-
markets are endless. That's the other beautiful
Yeah,
thing.
I think the markets are endless.
There's a lot of cool things about growing on Cape Cod. Like, I'm not from Cape Cod, but I've been here for 10 years, and and I come from a place where the food system is robust. It's beautiful. There's farms everywhere. You can access things. But here it was so different to me, but it's very cool. There's a lot of open market space because there's not a lot of farms. So that you could sell the restaurants, you could sell the grocery stores. There's if you can get an agribusiness up and running and you can successfully farm here, there's lots of people that would like to buy your food. There's farmers markets begging for more produce vendors. Like ours, a lot of come over the bridge, So we have farmers markets, but we need more local farmers at those markets. It's like, but if you can support those people now, they're gonna keep existing, and then we got to work on making more.
And yet, Cape Cod was an agrarian society at one point.
Yes.
But what sort of took over that was it started to become a very popular place, was one thing. So more people came, and that meant more of the land got taken away for development.
And I think there must have been some disenchantment by a generation of farmers who, as they aged out, their children
Right.
wanted to go to the city, wanted to go to other places.
And also food
yeah.
became more readily available in the supermarkets.
Yeah, that's true,
right,
too.
Instead
Yeah.
of the farms, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about your question, what can people do? So we started with support farming, support local food, that there's a market, but I mean, you can support with your dollars, you can support with your choices, you can support with your vote, and even even being a voice in the community that is asking us to think about our food system locally. I think that's a major way that people can support. I mean, letters to the editor, just wait. We really would benefit from having more food growing here. What could I do to help make that happen? Sometimes it can be as much as just lending your voice or volunteering for an organization that is working on it, right? So there are lots of ways to support, and we haven't even mentioned the Farm Bill. So the Farm Bill is in the Congress right now. They are currently, I guess they're going to have to file, or whatever the word is, for an extension of the 2018 bill, because it has been debated so much that it's still being debated on the floors in the House and the Senate. So it's a bill that is written every 5 years, and it has heavily favored big ag.
Is this the first year there's a component of regenerative agriculture in it? Is this the first time it's being introduced into the Bill, do we know?
It is my impression, from what I'm hearing, that this is the first time.
So
And
that's
you better
good.
believe that Big Ag is lobbying against
Mm-hmm.
having regenerative agriculture be recognized or supported. But there is a version that is doing that, and so, writing to our representatives to let them know that we support regenerative agriculture is an easy and inexpensive thing that we all can do.
Well, I think perhaps on that note, I want to thank Jeny and Ellie for being here with me. I think we've had a really good discussion. I am reconvinced that regenerative agriculture is definitely a direction that we have to be going in and continue to go in and expand. And I hope that the community of Cape Cod can embrace what the farmers on Cape Cod are doing. That is going to help, a piece of this climate problem that we have and our need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions on several different levels. So I want to thank you for being with me here today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for
It's
having
been
the conversation.
an inspiring conversation, and I love the alignment of these two organizations. It's very exciting.
Well, there might be another conversation that we have to continue this,
Oh,
okay?
we hope there are many.
Okay, sounds great. All right, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who listened here today at Climate Matters, and have yourself a great day.